Cool. Well, thank you for joining. Before we dive into the actual talk, I am just curious if anybody is brave enough to tell me what drew you to this talk. And James, you can't say because you know me. Uh, would love to know motivation, thoughts. What drew you into this talk? Anyone brave enough to talk?
Oh, sure, I'll go.
Cool.
Well, I will use that excuse. I used to work with Jessica many years ago, and I saw she was talking about this topic, and I thought it'd be a good thing to listen to. But in addition to that, I am curious about the next evolution for Agile, because I've seen that kind of term or phrase thrown around before about what's coming next, and I'm always curious about what's coming next. So I'd love
Okay.
to hear what you have to say.
Cool. All right. Well, hopefully, you don't think this is blasphemy, what I'm about to say. And don't worry, we're not going to get into an hour of me telling you the many reasons why I think it's dead. That is not my take by any means. I just think it's time that it needs to evolve a little bit. So, jumping into this is me. I'm Jessica Soroky. I could put a bio and all that fun stuff, but really, I'm just a leader who believes in personal responsibility and likes to work smarter wherever I possibly can, which is honestly a big reason that I went down this evolution for myself. About 2.5 years ago now. If you care, I do have a LinkedIn. I would love to hang out and chat on LinkedIn. So feel free to connect with me there, and we can always follow up after this if you have any more questions or anything like that. I'm going to minimize this because I can't see all of the things all at the same time. So I don't know if you guys have been following headlines, but a big reason why this became a passion of mine from a topic point of view is that I just started noticing, not only in my own experience, that we are going to talk about a real world experience of the company that I'm currently at, but I saw headline after headline after headline when tech companies cut. One of the first places that they look is operational roles, whether that be Agile, Scrum Master, coaches, RTEs, project managers. There is a thing with companies believing when they need to tighten their belt that operations is one of the easiest places for them to start to trim the fat. Do I believe that we are fat? Absolutely not. But I can understand. I spent almost a year and a half, a little bit over a year and a half, as a chief of staff to a CTO. And I will tell you, it changed every point of view I had on Agile, because when you get to see behind the curtain and see how an engineering organization has to run, has to handle budget, there truly is nothing more important than the folks that can hands on keyboard write code, test code, launch code. Like, it really is just that simple. And while I somewhat understood that when I was in my previous Agile coaching roles and Scrum Master jobs and leadership roles, leading RTs and Scrum Masters, it didn't really sink in until I was held to the same standard as the CTO to justify what made up an engineering budget. And to have to justify ratios, Agile ratios to engineers, all sorts of things. So it really caught my attention. I saw a lot of these headlines. Capital One probably got everyone's attention the most because of the quantity that they cut. It also caught everyone's attention because if you were in the job market at all, I feel like in the last 6, 7, 8, 10 years, you had to have found a Capital One Agile posting at some point in that experience. They were constantly hiring, constantly adding to their coaching team. If you talked to anyone at that company, they were very proud of what they were doing in the Agile space. So to see them cut that many roles was a pretty huge deal. Pretty big headline. So I moved, just for a little bit of background, for the last 8 years. I've been in a leadership position, non-consulting, full-time for companies, where my job was to lead Agile teams of Scrum Masters, teams of release trained engineers, and it was in that experience that I had this awakening moment of, it's my job to keep people employed. Somebody I was talking to recently actually put it slightly differently than that and described it as making them unfireable, which I thought was kind of a cool twist on the same concept. And so this particular talk came out of a pretty drastic transformation I took my current company through in the last 2 years, that the entire point of it was to keep them from firing my team. That was it. That was at the core. I wanted to keep as many of my humans employed for as long as possible. Yes, I would like them to stay employed because they're adding value, but I really just wanted to keep them getting a paycheck at the end of the day. So, real life example, we are a mid-sized SaaS company. If you're intelligent, know how to Google or go to LinkedIn, you're going to figure out what company I work for and what example this is, but I did not feel the need to put their logo on here. It is a company that has been agile from day one. The company's CEO came from Rally Software, which I'm sure all of you know, is an agile organization itself. He was a product manager when he was there, deeply in love with agile. When he started the company I'm at now, he has always said that that was how he wants to function. When I joined the company about 6.5 years ago, they brought me in because they were, I want to say like 6 Scrum teams, but essentially functioning as if they still worked in a garage, even though ironically they worked in a bank building. And there was no rhyme or reason to how any of these teams functioned or what processes they followed. They were all mostly agile, but not consistent whatsoever. And they knew that they're about to hit hyper growth. So they brought me in to try to create some level of consistency and transparency and communication up to their growing executive leadership team. We scaled to 34 Scrum teams at its peak, 17 Scrum Masters, but where things started to change, like many companies, this super non-fun global pandemic hit. And even though our company was not immediately impacted in a drastic way, our impact was felt over the next 1.5 to 2 years, where we were seeing our customers start to realize their impacts. We had, of course, some immediate stuff, right? So customers in the restaurant industry and hospitality, all that kind of stuff, they took some pretty immediate hits. But we didn't see a drastic change in our overall growth until, like I said, about 1.5 years later. And it was about that time when rumors of layoffs started. That guess what questions the Agile leader started getting at that time. At this point, by the way, when we started getting these questions, I had moved into my chief of staff role. So there was actually somebody that had taken my old job, who I adore, and she did an amazing job. But she and I started getting lots and lots of questions. Anyone have any guesses on what those questions are? There's a hint on the screen. I like to engage with you, so if this is annoying, apologies, but I'm going to keep doing it throughout the presentation. So somebody's got to play with me.
What's the value of the team members?
What's the value of the Scrum Masters specifically? But yes, I will still give you points. You win. We were getting that. We were getting questions like, do we really need this many of them? Do they have to be dedicated? Why can't my EM, engineering manager, just do it instead of this extra cost center? All sorts of things like that. I have been through that dog and pony show enough. I spent probably, I think, almost 7 years as an Agile consultant, and wow, the amount of times that I watched those questions turn into layoffs and job cuts and all sorts of other things, I knew very quickly that we were going to have a problem if we didn't do something about it. Simultaneously, our company had introduced a new team called Product Operations. Anybody familiar with what Product Operations is? I see a few heads shaking no. Okay, then let me hit pause for a second and let me explain Product Operations. So it's actually scaling quite a bit now. It's pretty prevalent in SaaS companies. It is getting more prevalent in large enterprise organizations like your Walmarts, your United Airlines, your Nikes, Home Depot. All the big, massive corporations are leaning into this role as well. But the idea of product operations is essentially it is intended to be like RevOps is to revenue or sales ops is to sales, but for the product organization. So as as companies are starting to really lean into product as a first-class citizen in their organizations, as companies really lean into this role of a CPO and put them at the C team's like table, equivalent to all the other C levels, they started to scale these product organizations where they were really increasing the number of product managers they had. They were increasing their design and research teams that were falling underneath the product organization. In some organizations, they would even put product marketing under the product organization. But these orgs were scaling, and they were scaling rapidly fast for the companies that were really starting to invest in them. And so this idea of product operations came organically from, there's a bunch of operating practices that product managers need to also follow and need to do. Think for any of your companies right now, AI is taking over, right? How does, who and where do you decide which AI tools your product managers should use to optimize how they work? The answer is they don't know. So they look to somebody in a product ops role. They looked at this new idea of this product operations team to figure out, how does product managers work? How do we make them more efficient? How do we minimize the administrative, like very manual, heavy task-based work that keeps them from ideating, talking to customers, planning strategies, planning roadmaps, all the things that their value is most optimally used on. So we introduced this idea of product ops. The way that it came to Pendo was like a lot of companies, which is, hey, we have a bunch of stuff we don't want our PMs doing. Nobody else wants to do it. Let's invent this new team and make them do all of this crap. It really was a bunch of crap. It was a grab bag of random activities and random tasks. At one point, our CEO was using this team as like his personal get shit done team. Excuse my French for anybody who does not like me cursing. I will try to maintain a low amount of that today, but didn't really know a better way of describing that for how he approached this team in the beginning. So all of that going on, what did we decide to do? We did a pretty massive assessment. Like I said earlier, I was a chief of staff for our CTO at the time. Because I wasn't technically leading this Agile team, he asked me to do the assessment from an objective point of view. I don't know about you guys, but objectively assessing how the Agile process that I put in the company was doing was not the world's easiest task, because I had to truly look at it pretty critically. But what we found was a couple things. One, we found that when it comes to the entire development cycle, so not just the software development cycle, but the whole product development cycle, meaning early stage is where product ideation is happening. You're talking about where they're playing with ideas, they're doing discovery, they're talking to customers, they're validating ideas, they're talking to executives. Executives are sometimes pushing ideas down. That's all that ideation. We weren't great at ideation. When I looked at this objectively, we had really inconsistent approaches and processes. Each of our PMs, product managers, were essentially approaching this wildly differently. And at the time, rightfully so, because depending on what product manager you were, you might just get a call from our CEO and he go, you're going to build this next. And you're like, oh, okay, I guess that's what my next roadmap is. Or you may be in a different spot where part of what you were working on was more core to our functionality, and you had a little bit of a longer tooth strategy where you could really examine how our customers were giving us feedback on how existing features were functioning. So we were really inconsistent. We also had too many people and roles involved, and we had a lot of lack of transparency and almost no communication to our business about what was happening before work got to the engineering teams. Those numerous people involved, that product ops team that I was talking about, early days, just like any other team that is trying to provide value, they were desperate to show that they were valuable to the company. So they were putting themselves pretty much anywhere and everywhere that they could. But what that resulted in was an unnecessary amount of handoffs between product operations, our scrum masters, our product managers. All of those roles were kind of stepping all over each other, and it got really, really messy. Where we were good was in that development lifecycle. So your typical, once development or engineering teams took the ball, when they had the ball, we had done that part very, very well. Our teams had gotten pretty stable. They were willing to take on accountability for their own process and efficiency. They were caring about their measures of success. They were doing all the ideal things. Were they perfect? Absolutely not. But they were doing pretty good from a Scrum standpoint. The other part that we absolutely sucked at, I'll be the first one to admit this, was our product launch. So I don't know if you guys know this, but at the time, this was somewhat new information to me. I say that sarcastically for the record. But when dev is done, when engineering teams are done, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that actually has to happen to get a product into customer hands. It doesn't just magically zap into the market and customers start using it and loving it. The company that I am at and was at during this transformation, we were horrible at it. It was an absolute black hole. We were, meaning there was no transparency into what happened once engineering was done. We were surprising our customer facing teams. Imagine if you're in tech support or customer success and a customer calls you and that's how you find out about a new feature that we launched. Not ideal, not great. And we were having, in all directions, a lack of understanding of what was going on. Folks didn't know what go-to-market was. Has anyone heard the phrase or the terminology go-to-market? Yeah. GTM, if your company is cool and likes to use 3-letter acronyms. Fun fact, my current company has an acronym for 3-letter acronyms, which is just wild, but is what it is. So yeah, go to market is basically everything that happens to get your product or your feature into customer hands. In an ideal state, it also is where, yes, TLA, thank you. I am so glad that somebody else uses TLA. I guess I'm not glad. That's actually, I have mixed emotions. I guess I'm glad that I'm not alone in that experience. But go to market is this cross-functional, very complex web of marketing, legal, security, enablement to your sales team if you have to actually sell this product and it doesn't just sell itself. All of these support, customer success, all of these roles need help and insights and enablement and support to get a product to effectively get into your customer hands. We were doing absolutely terrible at this. So here comes product ops. Weird, I know, because we already had product ops. You're like, what are you talking about? Here comes product ops. We did a really big transformation. This is where I'm going to kind of start to get into some of the stuff that might be considered blasphemy, but let's stick with me for a minute. I mentioned earlier, there's too many cooks in the kitchen. We had too many folks that were trying desperately to prove value. Like I said, when this product operations team was created, we also simultaneously had all of our Scrum Masters starting to hear the same questions, getting pushback from the teams. We have a bunch of very excited, engaged engineering managers, which is amazing on one hand, but not great on the other hand, because then they think that they can run the whole Scrum process and that we weren't needed. So prod ops at this point in time had a really unclear vision. Our partners across the business had no idea what product operations was, what they were supposed to be doing, how to utilize them, how to get value out of them. Like I said, they had that mixed bag of tasks, and we had those unproductive handoffs. So we had a choice. We could either dig in and just hope it was going to get better, or we could adapt. I hope you guys are not surprised by this, but I chose that we are going to adapt. So what I suggested to our organization was to shift from focusing on the SDLC, software development lifecycle, and start focusing on the PDLC, product development lifecycle. And that in that shift, we took all of our Scrum Masters and moved them into program management. That in itself is probably not the wildest change. You're like, cool, you changed their name. No, we changed everything about their job. We changed the scope of their responsibility. We, instead of them being just solely responsible for the Scrum process when it came to their engineering teams, we made them responsible from the entire PDLC, meaning that they were to program manage, optimize process from the minute a PM came up with an idea all the way through its launch into customer hands, and paying attention to how our customers engaged with it once it was in the market. Sorry, I want to make sure I wasn't missing any questions and comments in there. So what's a PDLC? PDLC, this is our version. This is my thoughts on this. If you Google PDLC, there's going to be a lot of different versions out there. A lot of times companies look at PDLC as like once a product hits market, how do you grow and scale that product? What we are talking about is this process. I know this is a wild circle, please bear with me. But starting with the idea, right? So where every product starts with, every feature starts with, it needs to be created somewhere. It's that ideation phase, discovery, validation. The company I work for is a product analytics tool, which means that we are very obsessed with what our customers are doing in our product, how they are using it, where they're not using it. And our whole sales pitch to our end users is that we can help them build better software products themselves because they understand what their customers are actually doing and where to continue to invest and where to stop investing. So for us, discovery and validation is a lot of customer facing conversations. It's digging into data. It's understanding how they're moving, where they're moving, what's working, what's not working. A good example of this is if you were an e-commerce website, product analytics tools are really great to show you where in your workflow is your buyer dropping off the cycle, right? So no offense, men, but I'm going to address all the females on the call because I'm going to go ahead and assume that we do this more. I love to create a cart. I'll put anything in a cart. Getting me to hit purchase is a wildly different experience, right? So if you're the company and the product that is building that website, building that e-commerce flow, you want to figure out why aren't they buying? Why aren't they hitting that final button? And sometimes it's just the psychology of what I just described, right? Because I love to fill up my cart. That's how I use my essentially my list tracking of what I like on that website. Other times it could be more complicated because you start asking me 7,000 questions I don't want to answer to hit buy, right? So I might fill out 3 of the questions, but then I'm going to drop off because now I'm annoyed and I don't want to answer the 7 remaining ones. Product analytics tool can show you exactly how your customers are working through that and at what stage they start to drop off. And you can incorporate live surveying, which means that when I drop off, I can get that annoying little pop-up. Are you sure? Tell us why you left, kind of thing. Which if you're not like me and actually fill those out, those are wildly helpful to the people that are, again, building and producing those pieces of software so they can continue to improve. I literally just did that example earlier today. I was buying something and I didn't go through with it because they started asking me too many things. I was like, this is annoying. So anyways, once we get through discovery and validation, our process has us go into define. Something to call out here is that in the define mode, this is where one of the biggest changes happened. Previously, when we were a more traditional Agile shop, to use that phrasing, which I hesitate to use, but we would very rarely incorporate cross-functional partners until we had the feature built. At this point, this shift, one of the big things that we changed was we started bringing in all kinds of cross-functional partners to do what we called a launch brief. So this is where we started to plan out the launch of this feature or new product with marketing early, with legal and security to check on what we thought we were going to build before we actually built it, to make sure that they weren't going to throw any red flags. If anybody's company is dabbling in the AI space, data processors are a super fun part of the development process, and making sure that your data processing agreements are always updated became our big Achilles heel for how we build our products. Engineering teams don't want to think about that kind of stuff, right? They just want to build, and they want to build fast and cool and innovative. But the amount of times that we learned the hard way how much it cost us when they would go down a path or use a vendor, and then we found out that the vendor's data processing agreement didn't match up with our standards and our customer standards, and we had to undo parts of it, was crazy. So we learned quickly, we got to define. We got to get more clear on what it is we're building and how it impacts the entire company, not just how it impacts our build teams, our engineering and product teams. So that's what define is. It's a brief moment. It is not, if anyone's thinking that sounds kind of like waterfall, I promise you, we don't get into wild detail. It is more just, here's our harebrained idea. Here's our customer validation as to why we think this is a good investment right now. Marketing, how would you position this? Legal and security, what are we not thinking about? Revenue, how do you want us to train the field, the sales reps on this particular type of thing? Other product leaders, where are the intersections in our product that we can make this even more impactful to our whole customer experience versus just this specific use case that we're playing with? The next phase, everyone in this room knows very, very well. This is iterate and build. I'm not even going to explain what that is, so we're just going to move on. As we're iterating and building, we start to do this organizational preparation phase. This is where one of the biggest differences. So in the old world, where our Scrum Masters owned essentially iterate and build, and they spent all of their time in that one segment, our program managers are now responsible for this entire life cycle. They're responsible for creating the process workflow that manages everything in this cycle. They're responsible for coordinating that define stage and getting all the right partners in the right room at the right time to have the really big conversations early on. They are still responsible for iterate and build, not nearly as in the weeds as they were. So we did create some kind of controversial agreements with our engineering managers to where they would take on certain tasks. We still do not trust them with all of the tasks. So our program managers still own things like retrospectives. They lean in pretty heavily on refinement sessions. If the product manager is newer or weaker, they may help out more with sprint planning. Our engineering managers take over daily stand-ups. I know, blasphemy, but it has been completely fine and has actually really increased the accountability on the engineering manager to pay attention to what is happening in their team and to keep a close eye on their engineers. And then our PMs are technically now, product managers are technically now responsible for sprint plannings. But like I said, depending on their maturity level, they may pull their program manager in to help facilitate that conversation, or to help them get used to how do I talk about velocity and capacity and how do I lead the team through that conversation. We had to do quite a bit of enablement to get them ready. So they're involved in iterate and build, but at a very different level than they were. And then the vast majority of their work comes into this organizational preparation, our go-to-market motion. They have worked very, very hard to completely redesign our go-to-market flow, our process essentially for how do we do this. It started with defining different levels of launches. I don't know about you guys, but our company does not launch everything the same way. Everything that we build is not the same size. We might have some small enhancements to existing parts of our product. We may have some big new feature sets. We may have a whole new product SKU that is a totally standalone product that is in the bigger ecosystem, but stands by itself. Those are not all the same types of launches. So first and foremost, we had to define the launch levels. So we have a level 1, 2, and 3. We then had to go educate the entire business on what those launch levels mean and how they play differently with those levels. For example, a launch level 3 is our baby enhancements. We're talking like little stuff that you might see in a release notes, but you would most likely as a customer almost never totally pay attention to or notice. The simple way that we communicated that with our business is that's where nobody really needs to do that. Nobody needs to pay super heavy attention to those level 3s. Instead, they need to focus on level 2s and level 1s. Level 1s are essentially a brand new product launch, brand new product SKU, or a very large feature set. So a significant experience change for the customer. It might be a add-on or expansion opportunity for our field. And we had to do a lot of enablement to be able to help them understand how do they engage and where do we need them to lean in. So in defining that go-to-market process, we had to define for each of those partners, for marketing, for sales enablement, for customer success, for technical success. We had to redefine for them what was expected of them in that process, and a interesting way of selling to them what they got out of it. So we couldn't just march around as product manager or program managers, and start telling all these business units what to do. We had to convince them that it was somewhat their idea, and at the end of the day was absolutely the best thing that they could possibly do because it brought them a ton more value. When I announced to my team of 17 Scrum Masters that I was changing their entire job, changing their title, and changing their responsibilities for the most part, the way that I leaned into it, I've got a slide on it on the benefits to them, but it was really heavily leaning into this organizational preparation and how much more exposure that they got with the business, how many more relationships they got to build, and how much more of our business they got to understand. So beyond that, there are still 2 more stops on this process, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. Launching is the actual motion of, hey, let's go to the market. Let's get the product out there. Companies handle this differently. Our company kind of goes back and forth. There are years where we will launch and market the thing at the same time. There are years where we will launch it technically, meaning it goes into our production environment and it sits there and it technically is accessible by customers, but we don't market it until we have a combined marketing launch with a few other things so that marketing can tell a more heavy value story. We're currently in one of the years where we are holding things into groups where they will go into production without a lot of splash. And then we will do these bigger marketing events where we bring a couple of them together and kind of sell the value of all of these things work together this way for you as an end user. So that launch is managing that. One of the things that our program managers have also started to do is work really heavily with our product managers on establishing success criteria for their product once it hits the market. Meaning, how do we know that what you just built is going well? And it's not just as simple as, well, what's selling? Not if not everything you build sells independently, right? So how do you know as a product manager, as a Scrum team, that what you are building has value? Our program managers got a crash course in North Star metrics for product development, and they started to really lean in and coach those product managers, PMs, on establishing them. We have an interesting use case because our tool is designed to help you, once you figure out what your North Star metric is, actually measure it in your product. So yeah, you could argue we cheat a little bit, but they would then build I was trying desperately not to say our name this entire time. They would then build our internal tool dashboards that track all those North Star metrics, and have used that dashboard with their teams leading up to launch. There are certain metrics that you can track as you're building. There are other metrics that you would track obviously once it gets to market. And we would reference those dashboards even after something went into market, which is why you see this weird arrow going from adoption back to iterate and build, because there's been many times where we have seen real data about how our customers are engaging with that product set and realizing that this isn't right. Like, we need to fix something, we need to iterate and adapt. Which is where I had the linchpin of telling my team, look, you're still doing Agile. Like, you're really still iterating and building and doing all the things that we love to do, but we're doing it in a way that frankly is significantly more impactful for our business and lets you provide a measurable difference in your value every single day. So big difference. Scrum Masters own iterate to build. Program managers now own this big PDLC. I'm gonna pause for just a second. If there's any questions so far. I know that I want to make sure I'm checking in, since I have spent the last 2-3 years deep diving into the whole product world, product operations, all that kind of fun stuff. And I saw a lot of head shaking no about what product operations is. So any questions so far?
Yeah, Jessica, what's the difference between product managers and program managers? Or maybe you'll get into that.
No, actually, it's a great question. I do not get into it. It's a huge difference. Product managers are like your POs, product owners. Some companies just call them product managers versus product owners. What I'm recognizing in the product industry is that product manager is typically seen as a higher title, right? So think about how we would use Scrum Master RTE, right? So it'd be product owner, product manager. Product owner would be at like the Scrum Master level. Product manager would be at the RTE level. Helpful?
RT? What's RT?
RTE, sorry. Release train engineer.
Oh, RTE. Okay, I got you.
Sorry
Okay,
about that.
yeah, that helps. Thanks.
Other questions so far?
Yeah, another question since you asked.
Go ahead.
So when you did this transition of the Scrum Masters to program managers, how did they respond to that, and were they all qualified to handle all those additional responsibilities?
Beautiful question. Out of my 17, I pissed off 4 of them, like deeply, significantly. I was able to work through that anger with 3 of the 4. I worked through it with the 4th one, but they, at the end of the day, which is perfectly fine, just made the choice that for them, they wanted to stay in a Scrum Master role. They really had a lot of passion for how that was described and kind of how that's always functioned. And that's just what they wanted. They gave it the good old try once they got over their anger with me. But I only lost one of my 17 and during the transition. And were they all qualified? Frankly, no. They were not all qualified to do all the things. In all honesty, there was a decent learning curve that I was also going through, trying to figure out what were the necessary skills to enable and handle this much bigger process. I have a decent ability at faking it till I make it. So I kind of just guessed for a while and started to realize that there was a lot of carryover. Like there actually weren't nearly as many skill gaps as I thought there were going to be. It was more just a learning curve of we're doing the same motions, we're doing the same basic things, but with different terminology, different team members. Instead of it being all engineering and maybe a product owner or business analyst, now we're playing with marketers and salespeople and success people and support people. So it's same activities, slightly different terms. So once we figured that out, we learned that what we needed to do was just a crash course in these departments. So we established a rotation of every week. I had a representative from one of these partner groups come into my staff meeting and do a deep dive education on what that department does, what their terms are, and what they care about. And that was actually the thing that made the most impact. It wasn't learning their terms or even what they did. It was when marketing came in and said, like, my entire job is to make sure that sales knows the value of what we're building. And to a bunch of folks who had only ever lived in engineering, they're like, what do you mean? Isn't it pretty like obvious the value of what we just built? And I will never forget, this marketer was like, yeah, no, it's not. Like, no, when someone doesn't live in it all the time, we don't know what you guys are doing. And it was these big aha moments of how each department thinks differently, values things differently. Revenue cracked my team up because revenue is obviously driven by quotas and they only get paid when they sell. And that kind of mentality is a lot harsher and a lot more black and white, even to a group that has worked with very black and white engineers their entire careers. That was a big shift of learning how to excite them and motivate them. Was how do I make every message I tell them how they're going to make money at the end of the day? If I can figure that out, I can get them on board real fast. So simple things like sales individuals, at least at our company, because all they want to do is make money, you have their attention for 5 minutes, 10 minutes max. You're not going to get them on a 60-minute meeting and expect them to stay engaged. It's just not going to happen. Unless that 60-minute meeting ends in a 6-figure deal that they get a commission off of. And we weren't the ones leading those types of meetings. So we created actually just a slide tangent for a second. When we had to turn around and educate our organization on how to utilize our team and what this new process looked like, we created a series of what we called snack videos. And our rule was that they could be no longer than 5 minutes a video because of that same concept of like just lack of willingness to stay in a concept. But it made us really hone our craft at simplifying our own message. We had, I think, like a dozen or so of these snack videos by the end of it, but we would release them like one at a time and typically not more than one within a 2-week time period because it was just too much for the different partner groups to consume. And that seemed to really work. Great question.
Good examples. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So who did they get to play with? One of the big ways that I motivated my team during this transition was using stakeholders, frankly, as a carrot, really leaning into this idea of, hey, you get to have way more value and engage with way more people. And so on this half of the process, which is a little bit more straightforward, right? They're working with our product operations managers. They're still working with their Scrum and engineering teams. They're working with product managers, which is our POs. They're working product marketing, and they're getting early engagement from legal and security. I know that last one's probably no one's favorite, but they started to, again, once they heard legal and security come in and do their little education to our team about how legal also doesn't like legal. We had a pretty hilarious session with one of our one of our councils about how they also don't like themselves, and they understand that they are like the least liked organization in the entire company because all they do is say no and make things more difficult. But they started that way and then led into how we can simplify it for them and how we can make interactions with them easier. And that seemed to really be a cool connection point for my team to go, oh, I can help my engineering teams not have to deal with these people. Like that's a cool value opportunity that I have. So on this side, pretty straightforward. It was on this other side of the process that we got to introduce a lot more characters to them. So you still have some of the same that you saw on the other side: product ops, product managers, product marketing, legal, security. But now they got revenue and sales. They got all their enablement. And one I forgot to list here is all the support teams. So we have 2 different types of support at the company that I'm at. We have technical support, which is as straightforward as it could be. And then we have customer support, and that is essentially account health. So tech support is going to be the people that answer your call when our software is not doing the thing you want it to do, or when you have a data question or a privacy question or something like that. Customer support is going to be the people that are helping you continue to grow your adoption of the product that you're paying a lot of money for. They're going to help you through renewal time, all that kind of fun stuff. They're going to help you get into new betas for new features and product sets. And that was a whole new revenue, whole new avenue, I apologize, that almost everybody on my team had never dealt with before, and saw an opportunity to really add even more value by getting to hang out with those folks as well. Okay, so motivation. How do we convince them? How did I keep 16 of my 17 through this transformation? Is about increased visibility. I tried to think about it from my own point of view when I was a Scrum Master, when I was directly leading teams. What did I like about it? What motivated me? And one of the big things that motivated me is I like to solve problems. I like to be recognized for solving problems. I like to feel like I'm adding value. I think there's very few people that get up and go to work every day that don't want to feel like they're doing something good in their job, that they're adding value to their company. So we really leaned heavily into that, increasing visibility. They, throughout this process, went from being an organization of 17 that were being questioned pretty heavily on their cost center. If I remember my math, I could probably do it really fast. I think they were like $1.2 million annually the company was spending on them. And they were able to more than double the scope of responsibility and not add a single penny. That was pretty attractive to our entire company. We were obnoxiously loud about that data point. And so then we started to get asked to do even more things. We got asked to start leading our company-wide OKR program. If you guys are familiar with OKRs, Objective Key Results. So they got to lead company-wide initiatives that were wildly cross-functional. They got to spend a lot of time with our C team members and got a lot of direct accolades from our C team members on how much value they were bringing. I think every person in our line of work likes to hear, "I couldn't have done this without you," kind of stuff. They got a ton of that feedback on a pretty regular basis. And then we were increasing their knowledge and exposure to other areas of the business. So one of the things I am personally the most proud of is that I have created new career paths for this team that none of them had ever thought about previously. 2 of my 17 have now moved into product management themselves. So leading our product directly, leading product strategy. I think those 2 are insane. I would personally never lead product, but that's a personal bias, to each their own. It is a very good career path. It's a whole new financial ceiling, especially at my company. We've had folks that have moved into other parts of the business. I had somebody move into marketing operations, another person move into revenue operations. So they're getting a significant amount of more exposure and the ability to adapt and adjust their career path, which has been really, really cool. It's also helped increase our recruiting. It's probably the number one thing I say when I start interviews, and it's gotten us, I think, a higher caliber of talent in the end, which has been really, really exciting as well. All right, so we had to get focused. And when we were getting focused, we had to get some clarity. So remember a while back, I mentioned that our product operations team, when I first joined, was, we'll just use my new favorite words, they were a little spastic. And they were trying real hard to add some value, but they were really struggling because they didn't have clarity of vision. So as this transition that I was taking this team through, I missed a key part. When I did this big Agile assessment of what was working and what wasn't working, and I made this suggestion that we should move all the scrum masters to program managers. I had zero intention of doing this directly. I really liked my chief of staff job. I was enjoying it. It was fun. And so they then turned around and like, well, this was your brilliant idea. You can lead them through this transformation, which turned out great. But at the time I was like, oi. So anyways, as we started to see success in this transformation, the organization came to me and said, hey, product operations really needs more focus. They need a lot more clarity. Can we combine these two organizations into a single org? We had already moved from our engineering house. So Scrum Masters reported up to engineering. We had moved as a part of this transformation to reporting up to product. Couple reasons. I was absolutely convinced that if we stayed in engineering, it was going to be way harder for me to change their jobs. They'd still be in the same essential job, family, and house and everything they were used to. And it would have been more of a title change than a real job change. So moving them to product helped really shake them up. It also put them in a wildly different position of power. Our particular company is one that puts product on a pedestal. They are by far the most powerful organization we have, second only to revenue, because they're the ones that sell. And if we didn't have revenue, we would have nothing. So we moved into product. And so it made a lot of sense for them to combine product operations and program management under one group. This is something that's a little bit unique to my company. If you start looking up and doing a bunch of research on product operations or program management, you aren't going to find it as often where they live in the same org. Typically, they are run as two independent teams, but we have found an absolute massive amount of efficiency by running them together in the same organization. So my technical title right now is Senior Director of Product Operations, which is inclusive of program management. So I have a team of product operations managers and a team of program managers. So I had to give them clarity. I had to separate responsibilities. Pendo, which I was going to say I wasn't going to say, but I just said, so whoops. We still, while we scaled a lot and we still very much embrace our Agile roots, would definitely cannot consider ourselves a wildly consistent company by design, meaning we typically describe our Scrum process as a set of guardrails that we ask the teams to stay within with a defined outcome that we ask them to deliver by the end of it. How they play in those guardrails to deliver that outcome, we don't really care as long as they stay in those guardrails and deliver the outcome. So because of that, though, it has made change management at scale when it comes to creating consistency of process not simple. So one of the big clarifications that we decided on was that product operations was going to handle it anytime that we were trying to scale operating systems or processes across the entire product and engineering organization. We call it R&D, the combo of those two orgs. And then our program managers got to handle kind of the unique flexes and adjustments that each of the product areas wanted or needed for how they functioned. Product operations. So if you look it up, Google it. I encourage you. There's a decent amount of content out there about what product operations is. They do a lot of internal tool adoption. They are becoming a much bigger part of the VOC. VOC meaning voice of customer, if you guys are not familiar with that acronym. But they are really starting to become this powerhouse of how do we pull all of this user customer data and feed it out to our product owners and product managers in a really meaningful way so that they can have key insights and iterate and develop their product more effectively. They're also doing tool administration and optimization. So product managers, just like every other job function out there, has their tool suite. And historically, there has not been a role or a function that has cared about how to make that better for product managers. So things like how do they manage their tasks? How do they handle their work? Where do they write their requirements? What AI tools are they using now? The amount of new AI requirements, writing tools that pop up every single week is insane. So product operations is really starting to take hold of doing a lot of the analysis and figuring out what makes sense for that business. For companies that are not like the one that I work at, that are needing to buy into a product analytics tool, the product operations team is typically the team that owns that product analytics tool, meaning they're the ones that are really trying to figure out where in your workflow are your customers the most engaged, where are they not. If anyone has ever heard of the 80-20 rule in software, yes, maybe, hopefully, that 80% of your users only end up using 20% of the stuff you build. Our product analytics tool makes that stupidly obvious, and lets you really focus on what is that 20% and how do I keep optimizing that, and how do I divest in some of the other areas. So I mentioned our program managers, they handle that product development lifecycle. They optimize it constantly. We're going through a refresh right now. They execute against it. They do that adoption goal setting. So they work with their teams to figure out, how do we know we're successful when we are done building, which is a super fun question. They're doing all that cross-functional coordination, and they're really leading the go-to-market pieces. Yeah, exactly. Totally. All right, so transferable skills. Let's get into the meat of this. And I apologize for kind of going to that super detailed breakdown of how we got to where we are. The good news is that every slide I'm about to show you is skills you already have. Agile facilitation, really simple. In the product ops world or program management world, it is very much transferable. How you facilitate, run your process, we're saying now you're just doing the same thing, but at a broader scale for optimizing workflows. You're ensuring collaboration between larger swaths of human beings. In the case of program management, like I said, you are still sometimes even leading the Scrum process. Stakeholder management, we just blew this up. It doesn't mean that you're not doing this. You're just doing this on a much bigger scale. So you're aligning and working with stakeholders across your entire company. There really is no other difference between how you do that in Agile than how you do it in Prod Ops, other than the number of departments that you are now engaging with. Data-driven decision-making, for those that are not as familiar with some of the product industry trends, being data-driven or data-informed. I don't know if you guys remember the lovely debates in the Agile world about, is it capital A or lowercase a? In the product world, the big debate is it data-driven or data-informed? It's all the same freaking thing to me. It's you're using data to help make decisions about what you're building. We're just changing the data you're paying attention to. So in Agile, obviously you're looking at team level data, velocity, burn down, KPIs, all that fun stuff. In the product world, you're looking at how your product's actually being used and how you're coaching and helping your product manager utilize that information to make better decisions. Continuous improvement, process scaling, guys, same thing. Absolute same thing. You are just improving process on a different scale. You're improving process for your entire product and engineering organizations, for your whole business. If you're improving the go-to-market process instead of just your individual Scrum teams or engineering processes. Communication and collaboration, product enablement. This is probably the one that sounds the most different, but it's really not. You are still just utilizing your ability to communicate effectively and drive collaboration to instead now train teams on your new processes, your new strategies, driving efficiency. It is, in my opinion, just a slightly fancier way of wording a very, very similar skill set. Change management, implementing product strategy. So you're managing the rollouts of these product processes. So like I mentioned, a big part of our lift was in that first 12 months of our transformation, we were doing some huge change management, huge. The entire company had to go through change management on what it meant to utilize product operations, what a program manager was, why they should care about what happens in this world of R&D or product and engineering. And how it impacts them and how it makes their jobs better in the end. But again, not really much different than change management that you would be doing already in an Agile environment. So the next wave I highlight here, hopefully not shocking. I think it's the product movement. I may or may not have gotten into a mild argument with the head of PMI when the announcement was made that Agile Alliance was partnering with PMI, because I think it's the wrong direction. I'm bold enough to say it out loud. I think going with project management feels comfy and familiar and probably like 90% the same. Whereas in reality, if you look up at the tech industry and this concept that technology is eating the world. There's probably a nicer way of saying that. I'm sure that's not the actual quote. I'm probably misquoting that, but the idea being technology is everywhere all the time. These companies are going, even companies like Home Depot are going through massive digital transformations when their entire product experience used to be in a store helping a customer find a thing on a shelf. Now they're having to figure out how they optimize web and mobile apps and how they get their customer engaged on a digital front on a constant basis. They are really heavily leaning into what it means to be a product company, what it means to have true product management skill set. And with all of that comes this big wave, this big movement. The cool thing, in my opinion, is that you get to ride the wave too. It's not the death of Agile, it's just the evolution of Agile, taking all of these skills that you guys already have, that we already have, and figuring out the new verbiage for them, the new application of them is, to me, an incredibly exciting opportunity to continue the thing that we all love doing versus constantly fighting and debating on social media platforms that it's not dead. In my opinion, more fun. We've had a great time. And as mentioned before, I would love to have you talk to anybody on my team. I think that they're all very, very excited and happy at the end of the day with the transformation that we went through and what it's done for their careers. All right, I think I hit the right time, or maybe I'm a few minutes early.
Yep. I think we have a few minutes. I'm going to stop recording.
Okay.
Hold on.